love, okay, is to become holy and to be evangelized by who you are. But nonetheless, to try to talk about love in our culture is very difficult now, because what they call love and what we call love are complete opposites, right? Reason. In a relativistic culture, you can't talk in terms of reason, because they don't know the difference between something which is objectively true and something which is an opinion any longer. And if you disagree with someone, you're attacking them personally, right? They take it personally because it's all about person. It's about me. I invent the reality I want to be, right? You are what you do, right? I just make it up as I go along. So it's very difficult to engage through the evangelization of reason in this culture. But beauty, on the other hand, still speaks. And this is an example I give of this. Imagine a Catholic, a Jew, a Protestant, a Muslim, an agnostic, and an atheist, right? It sounds like it's going to be a joke. But it isn't, so don't look for the punchline. And you've got these people, and they disagree fundamentally on so many things. And you sit them down in the dark, in a field, facing east. And sometime later, they see the sunrise. And they maybe see the sunrise, and maybe you can look at the sun when it first comes above the horizon. Maybe it's white, like the moon, and you can stare straight at it. Then it turns red, and as it turns red, it spreads its redness right across the sky. And then it rises further and becomes gold, and you have to look away. You can't see it any longer. All of those people, regardless of their differences in religion and philosophy, are going to experience something beautiful. And what happens when you experience something beautiful is a sense of gratitude. It's good that we're here. And when you experience that sense of gratitude, the natural thing that arises from that sense of gratitude was, who do I thank? Who do I thank for this experience? And you start asking the right questions. And unless you start asking the right questions, you're not going to come to the right answers. So that's the evangelizing power of beauty in an age which has turned its back on reason and love.
In the room, there are many people who are intent in living out the mission that you just described. So for example, we have a group from Cincinnati who are here because they want to evangelize with beauty, in the same way that the Sheen Center here in New York does. They want to try to establish like a satellite center in Cincinnati.
Wonderful.
We have poets, we have musicians, we have painters. So what can you say to them to help them and encourage them? Make it good.
Well, you have to, I think, you have to make it that Trinitarian reality. In other words, you have to put the goodness and truth of God into everything beautiful you make, and you have to see it as a service. You have to shun any signs of the egocentric, any signs of the narcissistic. You have to do it on your knees. You're gifted, and remember what a gift is. A gift is something which isn't yours, it was given to you. Right? And you don't own it, you owe it back to the giver of the gift. So I think great art is giving back to the giver of the gift the fruits of the gift given. And I think that needs to be at the heart of anybody who's trying to evangelize through the power of beauty.
Yeah. So we would like to hear the questions that you have for Joseph Pearce. And I will be happy to field those for you. Yes, please.
I don't have a question, but I thought it'd be something he'd enjoy hearing. In the Times Literary Supplement last time, the British writer Ferdinand Mount was talking about his father's deciding when young Ferdy was 15 years old that he had to learn to shoot. And they happened to be neighbors of Siegfried and Sassoon in the country.
Okay.
So his father borrowed this blunderbuss of an old gun from Big Thing from the neighbor. And Ferdy and his father went out into the field. And Ferdy had no interest in it, really, the whole operation. But, in fact, a grouse, I think it was, came right into his sights, and he realized that he could really get this thing. And he got this Big Thing apparatus into position. And just then, Sassoon, very old man, came running out and he said, "Oh, don't, please don't shoot him. He's so beautiful."
Wow.
Really?
It was so ironic. I didn't, he had the gun, he kept it, and he gave it. He didn't make any issue about lending it, and yet he couldn't bear to see this little creature killed.
Yeah. I mean, again, there has to be a mystical sense, I think, with any artist, in fact, with any human being, of our relationship with creation. And we do need to reverence it, because it's something made directly by God. Now, Tolkien, made a distinction between creation, that which is made by God, ex nihilo, from nothing, and subcreation, those things that are made by us, artistically or technically. But this is something I think, I'm going to go off on a tangent, but I think it addresses the issue of evangelizing through the power of beauty. There is a way, so there's a hierarchy. Tolkien basically talks about things, what I call a hierarchy of creative value. At the top is the creator, below that is creation, those things made directly by him. And then there's subcreation, things that we make, if you like, in imitation of him, the image of God in us, in our imagination. But there is a way in which our subcreation can even improve upon God's creation. And that sounds at first perhaps almost blasphemous, but I want to explain. So I'm going to tell you a story. All good stories begin with once upon a time. So once upon a time, there was a piece of rock, and it lived buried in the ground for millions of years. And it was beautiful because it was made by God, but nobody ever saw it. And then through technology, they dug this piece of rock up. And this man saw this piece of rock and saw potential in this piece of rock. And he started chiseling at it. And that piece of rock now is on the right as you go into St. Peter's Basilica in Rome, the Pieta. And we see there how a piece of rock, God made it possible. That was the primal material without which it could not be done. But in digging it up from the ground and doing something beautiful with it, we've actually improved upon God's creation. But why and how? By working with him, not against him.
Do you think there's still time to put the grouse in the play?
I think so, yeah. Can we kill it first? Because we don't want it flying all over the place.
Can't kill it, you can't kill it. Listening?
Don't be shy. Yes, Joseph.
This sounds a little silly, but I'm wondering your thoughts on the new Wonder Woman movie. Surprisingly set during World War I, and although it has a very kind of superficial presentation of the horrors of war, it may do more to introduce people to the First World War than anything.
Okay, well, let me say one thing by way of answering that question, is that, our son, who's 15 years old, has Down and autism. By the time that we put him to bed at night and get our daughter down, and he gets up early in the morning, and I get up with him. I'm the morning bird, my wife's the night owl, so it makes sense for me to do the morning duty. Basically, by the time they're asleep, there's no way to have the energy to watch a movie. And because of our situation, my wife and I have not had a date for about 12 years. I want people to be crying now. Come on, this is a heartbreaking story. You're laughing. It's completely heartless, Father.
You're in New York.
I'm in New York, yeah, say no more. But we have some friends, and now our daughter's 9, and she's actually old enough to be excited about being left with other people and being away from Mama for a while. So we have the prospect of going on, I will get to Wonder Woman in a minute, actually. I'm going on a date for the first time over the next few weeks, and we're going to sort out the date. And I actually was having a chat with Lou when we were down at the Ground Zero today. And I said, no, I know nothing about movies. I have not seen a movie for 10 years. Because I said, by the time the children are asleep, I'm not going to sit up for another 2 hours. The only movies I've actually watched are ones we can watch with our 9-year-old daughter. Right? So we saw Sound of Music fairly recently. So I said to Lou, is there a movie that's out at the moment that might be worth going to? And he said without hesitation, Wonder Woman. And that surprised me because I'm not a great one for these, superhero movies. But he basically started off saying it's not a typical superhero movie, so now I'm interested. So I'm sort of taking it as providential that the fact that he said that and you've asked the question means that that's when I'm taking my wife on a date. And if it goes wrong, it's your fault.
In the back, yes. Greg Wolf.
I love the words evangelization and art, but when you put the words evangelization and art in the same sentence, I get nervous and reach for the nearest blunt instrument. Because the minute you put those two words together, you create the possibility that art is reduced to propaganda, that it's reduced to a didactic lesson teaching thing, which seems to me to negate the very notion of art, which is a gratuitous representation of reality that's not specifically trying to, it's not just a sugar coating around a proposition, it's a different way of approaching truth that isn't just, again, this kind of sweet sugar coating around the bitter pill of truth. Would you be willing to concede something like that and nuance those issues a little bit?
Yeah, I would say that if you can't evangelize through the power of beauty unless the thing you're evangelizing with is beautiful. And art which is didactic or preachy or propagandistic is not beautiful. So, it would be, the blunt instrument would be the thing you're trying to evangelize with because it's not beautiful, right? But I would give you an example of one thing I do to evangelize for the power of beauty. I've written several books on the Catholic dimension of The Lord of the Rings. Now, The Lord of the Rings is a work of great subtlety, dexterity, brilliance, one of the greatest stories ever told. But Tolkien does embed dates in there. He uses numerical signifiers in the same way that the Beowulf poet does. And the fact that that's missed by 95% of the people reading it, including myself, the first couple of times I read the book, may well be a good thing, right? Because it's a subtlety that's probably necessary. But it is there, and I don't think that I'm doing a disservice when I'm pointing out, if Tolkien deliberately chooses March the 25th as the date that the ring's destroyed, and December the 25th as the date that the Fellowship leave Rivendell on the journey to Mount Doom, I don't think I'm doing a disservice in bringing those details to light. But of course, the thing I'm doing it with is something which is intrinsically beautiful because it's not preachy or didactic.
I mean, you can put evangelization and food in the same sentence, can't you? I mean, I think it's basically the same dynamic. For me, which is why the Eucharist was not a big speech, But that's just me. I'm not Joseph Pearce. Yes.
So as a Catholic artist, I really respond to what you're saying about the transcendentals and how beauty is kind of part of the sort of keros of evangelization for the age, and that it also sort of, I think beauty and laughter, they kind of suspend our apathy and allow us to encounter truth and goodness too. But as, I know several Catholic artists in here, we do exist. We're sort of hidden in plain sight. Do you have any thoughts or recommendations about how we can also support one another? Because that's something in the New York City community especially, we're all very interested in doing, but we don't really know how, other than just getting together and trying to do things.
Well, I mean, I one thing that I've done, I didn't realize that Greg Wolf is in the audience here. Good to see you, Greg. Greg and I have one thing in common, and the magazines aren't the same, but they're doing similar things. Greg founded a magazine called Image, I'm guessing 20 or so years ago now, and I'm the founding editor of a magazine called St. Austin Review, with the subtitle Reclaiming Culture, which is now 17 years old. And one of the things, we don't do exactly the same thing, but one of the things, I'm going to speak for myself now. I don't want to speak for you, Greg, all right? Because I don't want you getting red and want to throw something at me again. Is that yes, we look at the past, so we have a different theme, and we look at the inheritance, the richness of our Christian civilization in terms of history, philosophy, visual arts, music, literature, etc. But we also have a regular art feature in the full colour section called Fenestra Celi, where we feature contemporary Catholic artists. So I'm trying to act as a catalyst in what I do, including in the editing of the magazine, for a revival, a Catholic revival in the arts, so visual arts, music, literature, etc. And one thing I would say that for instance, when I first came to the States, so 15 years ago, one of the questions I hated to be asked was, well, you know, this Catholic revival from Newman through to, you know, the 1950s was great. It's 100 years of great stuff, but what's happened? What's happened now? What went wrong? You know, my heart would sink because you've got to ask all sorts of questions about the 1960s and the spirit of Vatican II and all sorts of other stuff, right? You've got to start questioning. But now I don't mind being asked it, because the one thing I've seen in the last 15 years is that it's a genuine resurgence and resurrection of revival in the Catholic art. So there are some very good Catholic fiction being written now, short stories and novels. There's a whole, plethora is not the right word, because that's a negative thing. Whatever the positive synonym of plethora is, there's a host of new Catholic poets publishing great Catholic poetry, and there's also a host of new Catholic artists doing exciting things going on in architecture, in musical composition. Mm-hmm. One of my great friends, Michael Kure's got a new CD out, which is just astonishing. So there is a Catholic revival happening, and the difference is, of course, that people like Chesterton could swim in the mainstream. Right? We find ourselves now up to a point being forced into the catacombs. Because the culture's become much more hostile overtly hostile to Christianity. But there's nothing wrong with that, right? Many of the most fruitful periods in the church's history have been times of persecution. So I don't think we should worry about that. But it does mean, of course, you're not going to be walking the red carpets at secular. You're getting secular awards, because that's not where we are. But it doesn't mean there's not great art being produced, and it doesn't mean that 50 years from now, people will not be saying, well, there's some great stuff being produced and it's being discovered. And one of the good things about that, of course, is that the Catholic artists won't be able to bask in their own egocentrism, because they're probably going to die poor and unknown and be discovered 50 years after their death, which is good for their soul.
You know, the church in New York is blessed with this glorious Sheen Center.
Yeah,
I mean, it would be fantastic to have a Catholic artist festival here, and just get everyone together and use these astonishing facilities, and just let it be an occasion of tremendous fraternity and of just a kind of an explosion of beauty. And yeah, I'm sure many great things could happen. Yes, Rita?
Yeah, I would like to meet people who are not Catholics. That's what I would like. How would you?
It's not difficult.
It's what?
It's not difficult.
But I don't like to be like the Catholic artist in the ghetto. Like I would like to meet people, you know, outside of, you know, friendly readership and.
Well, insofar as you manage to germinate beyond the ghetto, you're evangelizing. Whether it's consciously, subconsciously, overtly, covertly, accidentally, deliberately, because what you'll be doing is sowing seeds beyond the ghetto. I'm all in favour of getting beyond the ghetto, right? But I do think that we should not despair because we find ourselves in the catacombs. Because if that's where culture's put us, it's put us there before, and it crucified our Lord. And there's no way to get to heaven except through the cross that he himself mounted. So, you know, in other words, the path of least resistance is dangerous. So if we want to engage with the wider culture because of a desire to change it for the better, then that's good. If we want to engage with the wider culture because we want the wider culture to accept us on its terms, we would end up not producing nothing worthwhile.
Yes, Maureen?
I'm part of the group from Cincinnati. I got excited when we heard on Catholic radio there about this Sheen Center. It just really was exciting. And so we would like to bring it to Cincinnati for all the reasons it's here. But I don't know, how do you get, like you said, everyone else interested to come in and see the Catholic art? You know, will we just be preaching to the choir? How successful will we be as an evangelizing institution? There's merit in feeding the souls of us in the good, the true, and the beautiful. But we have to convince, and the Archdiocese of Cincinnati is interested in this and eager to find out more, but they're going to want to know that it will be successful in drawing people in. And how do you get them to come in?
You invite Joseph Pearce.
We need to begin by defining right at the beginning what we mean by success.
Yeah.
Because if success is the number of posteriors we get on seats, you will very quickly lose your vision altogether and just become diluted, and you won't be a Christian witness at all, because you'll just be trying to do what the culture wants already. And first of all, that will fail. Even if you succeed economically for a while, you know, you're just going to be part of the mess that's out there already. So the success has to be to produce good, authentic art, whether it's theatre or visual arts, poetry readings, whatever, right? And not worry so much about how many people come at first. If the quality is good and you do the best you can to get the word out, those who are interested will be there, and they will start telling other people who might be interested. So, and that might take time. So the one thing you do need, I think, to take back to the diocese is that you need to be given time. In other words, don't expect, you know, if this is not making a profit in 12 months, it's a failure. Well, no, they're still on the runway at that point, gathering momentum and traction and speed. So the investment has to be a commitment in time and confidence in the vision. But the vision has to be rooted in a definition of what success is. And success ultimately is to produce great art which changes the culture, not to try to get posteriors on seats. That's the conversation.
Thanks a lot, Joseph.
Yes.
Is there a reason that your title resembles the one that comes from the Archbishop, or is that just coincidental?
Oh.
That's a good question. No, it's. I'm aware of the other book, and so yes, there's a play on that title, in the title of my play. But my verse drama is not a play. It's not a play. So yeah, I mean, it's a literary allusion, but there's no influence of that work on mine.
You just mentioned a verse drama versus a play. I'm not sure that all of us maybe even really understand that distinction. Could you explain that a little bit? I know many of us are going to be wanting to go to the show, so help us understand that.
Yeah, well, obviously a play is something which is normally performed in acts and scenes, and it follows a certain way that the plot unfolds, the denouement and everything else. This is not. It's not divided into scenes. In actual fact, it's one seamless scene, and it's not. Most of it's in verse, but some of it's in prose. It just doesn't. It's what I actually call. This is a play on words. Transgenre. Yes, little smirks and stickers out there. Transgenre, because it's almost a biography of Sassoon, a sort of spiritual, metaphysical biography, but it isn't just a biography. It's almost a play because it's a drama that unfolds, unravels, and has an ending, but it's not really a play. A large part of it's poetry, but it's not just a collection of poetry. So it really transcends any neat pigeonhole. So I called it, on the book at least, and this other thing, the other problem is, you know, the book can't be exactly the same as the performed piece. We've been going over all that over the last few weeks. So the book, I describe it as a verse tapestry, because what I've done is woven together other people's work. So for instance, obviously the bulk of the work in it, with the three main writers in it are Siegfried, Sassoon, Wilfred, Owen and me, right? So they're the three main writers, but the character of Death, quotes T.S. Eliot, G.K. Chesterton, Jeremiah Hopkins, Rupert Brooke, Edith Sitwell, Thomas Gray. There's Francis Thompson. So there's all of this going on. So it is a verse tapestry is the nearest I can get to defining it, but that doesn't really do justice to it when it's on the stage with the dynamism of the performers and moving forward and all the other stuff, the special effects and the lighting, and so it's much more dynamic than just a tapestry once it's incarnate on the stage. And verse drama seems a rather anemic, pathetic label for it, but I can't think of anything better.
It is the poetic equivalent of ballet. And ballet is theater, but it is not a play. And this is theater because you will experience a catharsis. And if you don't, you just ask for your money back. But you will.
Thank you. That's very good. Yeah, I think actually the analogy with ballet is very good. There's something very balletic about it as well. It's a ballet with words.
I want to ask a question going back to your conversion. What was it that opened you? I'm not talking about when you were like holding the rosary in your hand, but what was it as a man in you that enabled you to embrace Catholicism?
Wow. Well, again, I've done my best to answer that question in the book, and it's difficult for me to do it in a 2-minute version. I will do my best, right? There's a parallel between my conversion and C.S. Lewis's in the sense of Chesterton's influence upon both of those conversions. And when Lewis first read Chesterton, which ironically, considering the topic of this evening, was during World War I, when he was recovering in a field hospital, which is where Sassoon and Owen meet in the verse ballet, he was an atheist and somewhat of a cynic. And he said he would have thought Chesterton would be the least conducive to who I was and my sensibilities, but somehow or other he couldn't help liking Chesterton, in spite of the fact that Chesterton was a Christian, in spite of the fact that Chesterton had this sort of rambunctious sense of humour. And what Lewis said, he realised later it was like a romance, because what he'd actually done was he'd fallen in love with C.S. Lewis. With G.K. Chesterton. He'd fallen in love with his goodness. That's what ultimately it was Chesterton's goodness that spoke to him. And I think with me the same thing. I was in bad places with bad people. I don't want to demonise everybody. Life's more complex than that. But as a general rule, I was in bad places with bad people doing bad things. And when I discovered Chesterton, that one thing that was going on was a rational level. Chesterton showed me there's a connection between faith and reason. Faith is not mumbo jumbo, right? It's rational. And that was very important to me because I did need to know that the Christianity was rational. I wasn't interested. But Chesterton's goodness, his joy, his joie de vivre, he had something. And what he had was very attractive. And what it was the Spirit of Christ. And of course, so I was attracted to him, and the more I fell in love with him, the more I ended up falling in love with Jesus Christ. So that's probably the best that I can do in a short answer.
The rosary, was it your grandmother's, and how did you get it in prison?
No, it wasn't my grandmother's. I don't know how I got it. I literally don't know how I got it. I'm assuming someone gave it to me, maybe during the court case, but I don't have any recollection of it being given to me. I just have a recollection of holding it on the second day of the sentence. And I'm manifestly insisting I'm not claiming it's a miracle. It's just it's amnesia, not a miracle, presumably. Although I don't say it's impossible.
Anyone else? Yes.
So who would be the very personal question for you, the Chestertons or the C.S. Lewis's or the Bernanoses or the Claudels or the Piggies or the Guardinis or the Balthazars or the Lubachs? Where are they?
Well, I think they're out there. I would hesitate. I would hesitate to start giving names. Largely because the effect, I think, would be pathetic. It would be bathos, because the people you just listed are people that are icons. They're in the canon, And people that are around today that are contemporaries, particularly because we live in a very secular culture, and most people won't even have heard of them, it's not going to have the right impact. But I mean, certainly if you want to send me an email privately, I will give you a list of people in terms of literature,
All those I
philosophy.
mentioned, it's really 100 years ago, right? So I'm not asking for those that, you know, right now or 10, 20, you know, even 40, 50 years ago.
Well, I mean, in the 20th century, I know I'm biased here, but I have and will defend my position. In the